Today we are going to talk about angle measures and segment lengths, but we're actually just going to look at angle measures today. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to talk about theorems about the angle measures. And there's two cases. There's always inside the triangle and outside the triangle. When it's inside the triangle, if I was finding the measure of angle 1, it is going to be half the measure of the angles that it intercepts. So the measure, or I'm sorry, the arcs it intercepts, the measure of arc NO plus the measure of arc PQ. So what I mean by that is we see this angle intercepts here and here, okay? If we were going to go with angle 2, it would also be half of the measure of NQ plus the measure of OP. So this angle here intercepts this, and this one intercepts that. All right, so let's look at a couple examples. In this case, here is X, and the arc that it cuts off is 110 degrees, and then its vertical angle cuts off the 80 degrees. So X is going to be equal to 1/2 80 plus 110, or 1/2 times 190, which is 85 degrees. Okay. In this case here, we're trying to find actually now one of the arcs. So we can still use that 1/2. We know that 55 degrees is going to be equal to 1/2 75 plus X. To make it easier, I would just multiply by 2 and get 110 equals 75 plus X. And then if you subtract 75 from both sides, you're going to get 35 for X. Now, the arcs, the angles we could be looking for are going to be outside a circle as well. And this is how I remember them. It's kind of a little acronym, and I call it the angle, the measure of the angle. And we'll say all of those angles are F is equal to 1/2 the difference of FARC minus NARC. Okay? FARC minus NARC. My algebra kids are sitting here laughing right now while they're taking their test. Okay? So it's the far arc minus, oh, it says FARC still, far arc minus the near arc, or FARC minus NARC, 1/2. All right. So for example, in the top circle, the measure of angle F would be equal to 1/2 AD, measure of arc AD, minus the measure of arc BD. Okay. In the second drawing down, the measure of angle F would be equal to 1/2 the measure of arc EG minus the measure of arc, oops, that's the near arc, bad, Miss Craig. We actually need another point in there to name it, so let's make this H. So the measure of arc EHG minus the measure of arc EG. Okay. And in the last example, the measure of angle F, far arc minus near arc, would be 1/2 the measure of arc KJ minus the measure of arc HI. So let's look at a couple examples. Okay, in this case, FARC minus NARC. So x is going to equal 1/2, 75 minus 15. So x is going to be equal to 1/2, 60, or 30 degrees. In this case now, we know that we have the angle measure is 30 degrees, and that's going to be equal to 1/2 the far arc, which is y, minus the near arc, which is 62. So y, and then 62. So I'm going to multiply by 2, and I'm going to get 60 equals y minus 62. And if I add 62, I'm going to get 122 for y. All right. Okay, so because these angles are congruent, remember their arc is half that size, so that means that this arc from here to here is going to be congruent to the arc from here to here. So those arcs are going to be congruent. So that means that this is going to be x as well. So if that's the case, then 360 minus 112 is going to be, I'm going to use my calculator because you guys know that I make mistakes. 360 minus 112 is equal to 248, and we're going to divide that by 2, so x is equal to 124 degrees. All right. Last example, we know that this and this are congruent because of vertical angles. So 9x plus 4 is going to be equal to 1/2 of 26x minus 5 minus, so that's our far arc, 7x minus 2. The first thing I would do is I would multiply by 2, so I would get 18x plus 8, and then I would combine my like terms, but be careful because of the negative sign. So 26x minus 7x is going to be 19x, and then -5 minus a -2 is going to be -3. So now if I subtract 18 from both sides, I'm going to get 8 equals, or I should say 18x, I'm going to say 8 equals x minus 3, and if I add x, x is 11. So remember that angles inside of an angle circle are going to be 1/2, I'm just going to say the arc, the sum of the arcs they intercept. So arc 1 plus arc 2. And angles outside are going to be equal, the measure of the angle is going to be equal to 1/2 FARC minus NARC.